The world at the edge of everything. A land where the wind carries the weight of 1,000 years. Here, on the frozen plains, a child stands alone against the silent, brutal majesty of the great void. Far beyond the horizon, the sparks of a coming storm begin to flicker. The old world is burning. To understand the empire that would consume the earth, one must first understand the silence of the steppe. The eternal blue sky, they called it, a witness to the birth of a legend and the death of nations. Survival was not a choice, it was the only law. In this cold, only the hardest steel could endure. Every day was a battle. Every breath, a victory against the elements that sought to erase you. Divided by ancient blood feuds, the tribes were scattered like dust in the wind, until one man found his purpose. From the ashes of betrayal, a will of iron was forged, a vision that would unite the disparate spirits. The sound of hooves began to echo across the plains, a slow, rhythmic drumbeat of destiny. One by one, the banners were raised together. The division was ending. The empire was beginning to breathe. He gave them a law, the Yasa, a code that bound every man from the Khan to the commoner. They became a force of nature, an ocean of horsemen moving with the precision of a single mind. Their bows could strike from distances unseen, a rain of death falling from the heavens. The horizon was no longer a boundary. It was an invitation to conquer the known world. From the gates of China to the shores of the Mediterranean, the world trembled at their approach. They brought peace through power, opening the veins of trade between East and West. Great cities fell, their walls crumbling before a tide of iron that could not be stopped. Though the empire is gone, the shadow it cast still lingers over the maps of the modern world, a legacy written in blood, gold, and the dust of the endless steppe. The world would never be the same. In the shadow of the Burkhan Khaldun Mountains, a legend began not with a crown, but with a loss. Yasugi, chief of the Borjigan, drank from a cup offered by enemies, a sip of peace that tasted of poison. The father died, and with him, the protection of the clan. The world grew cold before the boy's eyes. To the tribes, a widow and her orphans were a burden. Loyalty was a luxury they could no longer afford. They were left to the earth. No horses, no herds, no hope. Only the will of a mother named Holun. They survived on wild onions and bitter roots. Life was a constant gnawing hunger. Temujin did not play. He endured. Every day was a lesson in the brutality of the natural order. But the greatest threat was not the cold. It was the division within, a rivalry born of desperation. To survive, Temujin made a choice that would haunt his soul. He would allow no one to stand in his way. The killing of Bektar was the end of his childhood. The boy was gone. In his place stood a survivor. But his enemies were watching. He was hunted, chained, and humiliated. A lion in a cage of wood and iron. They tried to break his spirit. They only succeeded in tempering it like steel. In the dead of night, he vanished, a ghost in the tall grass, returning to the only world he knew. He returned not as a victim, but as a man with a name that people began to whisper with both fear and hope. He found his anchor in Borte, a marriage of politics but also of a deep, unspoken bond. With her came a gift of power, a sable coat that would buy him the alliance of a great Khan. But peace was a fleeting dream. The Merkits came in the night, seeking vengeance for an old slight. He watched as they took her. He was powerful enough to survive, but too weak to protect the woman he loved. This was the final breaking point. To get her back, he would have to become the very storm he had spent his life fleeing. None. Orchestral score builds with low, heavy drums. None. Music fades to a haunting solo string melody. None. Wind howls softly in the audio. To rescue his wife and his future, Temujin sought the shadow of a giant, Togrul, the Khan of the Karaites. Beside him stood Jamuka, his blood brother, two hearts beating as one, bound by an oath that would soon break. But brotherhood is fragile on the steppe. One sought the old ways of nobility, the other, a world built on merit. Temujin was a revolutionary. He did not care for your ancestors. He cared for your skill with a bow and your loyalty to the cause. The steppe turned red. Friends became enemies as the war for the soul of the Mongols began. From the depths of the Gobi to the peaks of the Altai, no tribe was left untouched by the storm. Those he conquered, he did not enslave. He invited them to join him, and thousands answered. Shepherds became generals. Orphans became princes. The old order was dying, and a new world was rising. By 1206, the silence of the steppe had been replaced by the roar of a united nation. It was time for the final declaration. They gathered at the headwaters of the Onon River. the leaders of every tribe, unified for the first time in history. Under the eternal blue sky, the banner of the 9 yak tails was unfurled, a symbol of absolute sovereignty. He was no longer Temujin the orphan. He was no longer Temujin the fugitive. The universal ruler, the great Khan, the man who would conquer the earth. The world at the edge of everything was now the center of the world, and the storm was just beginning. None. Epic crowd roar and heavy war drums swell to a peak. None. War drums continue with a rhythmic, pounding beat. None. A single high-pitched Mongolian throat singing note enters. None. Music builds to a final, crashing percussion hit. None. Distant wind sounds return. Genghis Khan did not just lead an army. He built a machine, a decimal system of 10, 100, 1,000. Absolute order in a world of chaos. Discipline was their greatest weapon. They moved as a single body, guided by signals seen and heard across the din of battle. Mobility was their lifeline. With 5 horses per man, they could outrun any army on earth, changing mounts without ever stopping. While other armies were slowed by heavy supply trains, the Mongols lived off the land and their herds. They were faster, lighter, and deadlier. Their composite bows were marvels of engineering, small enough for a horseman, powerful enough to pierce plate armor. They mastered the art of the retreat, drawing enemies out, then turning in the saddle to deliver a lethal parting blow. Communication was instant. The Yam messenger system was the world's first high-speed data network, spanning continents. The Great Khan knew where every enemy was while they remained blind. Information was the fuel for his war machine. But their most potent weapon was fear. Rumors of their cruelty traveled faster than their arrows. Cities surrendered before a single Mongol arrived. The psychological blow was total. You were not fighting an army, you were fighting the inevitable. This was the machine that would dismantle empires, not through numbers alone, but through a terrifyingly efficient intelligence. None. Deep rhythmic war drums build to a deafening pace. None. Orchestral score reaches a frantic epic peak. None. A haunting Mongolian throat singing chant swells. None. Music begins to fade into a low, rumbling bass note. None. Sound of wind and a distant, solitary drum. Beyond the steppe lay the ultimate prize. The Jin dynasty, a civilization of stone, silk, and millions, protected by the greatest wall ever built. But Genghis Khan did not see a wall. He saw a challenge. The storm of the north was moving south, and nothing could bar its path. The wall was only as strong as the men who guarded it. Through strategy and speed, the Mongols bypassed the main defenses, pouring into the heart of China. To take the cities, the Mongols adapted. They conscripted the best engineers in the world, turning the technology of the conquered against the crown. The siege was a symphony of destruction. Wood, iron, and fire prepared to scream. They rained fire from the heavens, pitch, naphtha, and terror falling upon the unsuspecting streets of the capital. Chengdu, the central capital, became a furnace. 1,000 years of history reduced to embers in a single brutal winter. The fall of the Jin capital was a warning to the world. The era of the walled city was over. The era of the Khan had begun. Where there were cities, there was now only dust. Where there were kings, there were now only ghosts. None. Deep orchestral score builds to a tragic, epic crescendo. None. War drums continue with a heavy, slow tempo. None. Solo Morincourt, Mongolian cello melody, plays a mourning theme. In the west lay the Khwarezmian Empire, a world of marble, spice, and science, unaware that it was standing in the path of a god. A simple trade mission became a massacre. Hundreds of Mongol merchants murdered, a spark that would set the world on fire. When the news reached the Khan, the silence of the steppe broke. He did not seek gold. He sought a total, absolute erasing of a people. This was no longer conquest. This was punishment. Genghis Khan prepared a campaign that would be remembered as the wrath of God. He divided his machine, 4 rivers of iron flowing from the north to drown the empire from every direction. Bukhara was the first to fall, a center of learning reduced to a graveyard. The walls could not hold back the inevitable. Inside the holy places, he made his declaration, "I am the flail of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me." Then came Samarkand. The jewel of the Silk Road was shattered. The population was driven out like livestock to be slaughtered. In less than 2 years, one of the most powerful empires on earth had ceased to exist. Its people were gone. Its history, ashes, Shah Muhammad fled, pursued by the Khan's best generals. He became a king without a kingdom, running from a shadow that was faster than light. He died on a desolate island in the Caspian Sea, dressed in rags, hiding from the name he had dared to insult. None. Low, ominous string melody builds with a single, slow drum beat. None. Haunting solo Morin-core theme returns. None. Music fades into the sound of distant, echoing thunder. In 1223, the machine turned its eyes toward the sunset. On the banks of the Kalka River, the knights of the west met the scouts of the east. It was a trap. For 9 days the Mongols fled, leading their confident enemies deep into the trap they had meticulously laid. Then, they turned. The circle closed. The Russian princes were crushed not just by steel, but by a strategy they could not comprehend. Europe had never seen anything like them. They were not just warriors. They were a force of nature that ignored the rules of chivalry. While other armies waited for spring, the Mongols welcomed the winter. The cold was their ally. They used the frozen rivers as highways, bypassing the muddy roads and striking deep into the heart of the Rus. Kiev fell in 1240. The mother of all Rus cities was silenced, its glory reduced to ash and bone. Their speed was terrifying. In a matter of months, they moved from the Dnieper to the Danube, dismantling kingdoms in their wake. At Legnica, the flower of European knighthood was mowed down by a rain of arrows. The cross could not withstand the crescent bow. In Hungary, the Sajo River ran red. King Bela fled, leaving his kingdom to the fire. Europe was wide open. Vienna was next. The panic reached the shores of the Atlantic. It seemed the end of the world had finally arrived. The Great Khan. Ogeday's death changed everything. A message arrived from the east, faster than any army. Suddenly, the storm receded. Without a final battle, without a reason the West could see, the Mongols vanished. Europe breathed again, but it would tremble for 100 years at the memory of the horsemen from the edge of the world. None. Deep orchestral score builds to a final haunting string note. None. Wind howls softly in the audio. In the year 1227, the man who had reshaped the world was himself being reshaped by time. The iron was growing cold. His final campaign was in the land of the Tanguts. Even in his twilight, his presence was a storm that demanded submission. During a hunt, the earth reached up to claim its master. A fall from his horse, a small accident, carrying the weight of a monumental fate. He did not die in the heat of battle, but in the quiet of his yurt. The universal ruler, succumbing to the one force he could not conquer, his own mortality. He looked up at the eternal blue sky one last time. His spirit was ready to return to the source from which it had sprung. The funeral was a secret. No wailing, no monuments. Every witness they met on the journey back was silenced to keep the Great Khan's rest eternal. They buried him in the heart of the mountains he loved, in a place where only the wind and the eagles could find him. They say 1,000 horses were driven over his grave to erase every trace. He left an empire that covered half the world, but not a single stone to mark his name. He became the earth itself. A legend that needs no marker, for his monument is the history of the world. None. Solo Morin-core melody plays a final peaceful theme. None. Music builds to a single deep bell toll. None. Bell toll echoes and fades into the sound of wind. The storm did not just pass. It changed the very shape of the world. Genghis Khan left behind the largest contiguous land empire in human history. Under his successors, the empire became a bridge. His grandson Kublai ruled a court where East and West finally shook hands. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, opened the veins of the earth. For the first time, a traveler could walk from Italy to China under the protection of a single law. Ideas flowed faster than armies. Printing, gunpowder, and the compass, the sparks of the modern world were carried in the saddlebags of the horde. It was the first era of globalization, a connected world unified by iron, but sustained by the hunger for knowledge and trade. But the connections also brought a curse. Along the trade routes traveled a silent killer. The Black Death followed the horsemen, claiming the lives of millions. The machine could be as destructive as it was creative. Centuries of knowledge were reduced to smoke in the fires of siege and conquest. To build the world anew, the Mongols first tore the old one down. The scars they left are still visible in the architecture of our modern nations. But in the end, the empire returned to the earth from which it came. The horses were stabled, and the banners were folded away. The universal ruler is gone, but the world he forged is the one we still inhabit.